from breakthrough strategies to game-changing innovations and cultural shifts. You'll discover the lessons that drive real impact, and we'll dive into the moments that changed everything. Welcome to The Missing Piece with April Reed. Today on The Missing Piece, I'm excited to welcome Ryan Barras, an enterprise technology, cybersecurity, and operational resilience leader with more than 15 years of experience helping organizations strengthen governance, manage risk, and lead through transformation. Ryan has served as Chief Information Security Officer and Director of IT Security at Mount Sinai Medical Center, where he has led major initiatives across cyber risk governance, AI governance, identity and access management, third-party risk, and operational resilience in a complex healthcare environment. He also spent nearly a decade in leadership at Lennar, including serving as Director of Security Operations and Deputy CISO. What makes Ryan's perspective so valuable is that he doesn't look at technology or cybersecurity in isolation. He connects it back to the business strategy, leadership, resilience, and the ability for organizations to grow and adapt in a changing world. He is also president of ISACA South Florida, serves on the board of SIM South Florida, and continues to advise organizations through Takesta Consulting. Ryan, welcome to the Missing Piece podcast. Happy to have you.
Great. Thank you so much, April. Gosh, that's a mouthful. I'm almost feeling like I need a break.
It's a mouthful too, but I'm excited to dive in because it's so impressive. But I think our audience wants to know, how did you get to where you are today? And how did you even break into this industry? So please introduce yourself from yourself and take us back to the beginning. How did you even get started?
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, that's a great question. I usually lead by telling folks, my path was very unconventional. I was raised in the Netherlands, and I studied economics and business development. And the first half of my career, I really spent in business. In fact, in economic development, I used to run the Netherlands Chamber of Commerce in Atlanta, and then later became an economic trade officer for the Dutch Consulate. And so a lot of my focus was on bilateral trade relations and running trade missions. And we ran lots of trade missions, but one of the most famous ones that people usually remember is the trade mission after Hurricane Katrina, where we brought in the water experts from the Netherlands, to help the U.S. Corps of Engineering understand, what are the techniques we're using in the Netherlands. So it was really really instrumental in helping rebuild the situation in Louisiana, because the Netherlands is 30% below sea level. So building levees is sort of imperative to the survival of the country. But I found myself doing more and more trade missions that were related to tech, biotech, nanotech, IT tech. And after a while decided that I wanted to transition from more of a diplomatic role to a practicing IT role. And I stepped into IT management consulting. And the reason I went that way is I became an ITIL expert, and ITIL expertise, naturally aligned with my business background, because when you think business, you think in terms of metrics and KPIs and SLAs and otherwise put, just getting stuff done. That's a business mindset. And so ITIL aligns very much with that from a process standpoint. And so that allowed me to enter the practicing world of IT, get exposure across the country, to many different large organizations. I'm accredited ITIL trainer, so I've trained hundreds of IT professionals and accredited them in ITIL best practices. And then at a certain point, I landed a large project with Lennar Home Building here in Miami. Stayed there with them for a couple of years. At some point, this CISO came to me and asked me if I wanted to join his team. And I was honored by the request, and I was very interested in security, and that led me down the path the last 6-7 years of becoming an IT security expert, and then later deputy CISO at Lennar, and then later CISO at Mount Sinai Hospital. So that's in a nutshell. I hope I didn't take too much time there, but that's sort of like I said, very unconventional path, but
Yeah.
unique.
So interesting. You weren't on the path to necessarily pursue cybersecurity or be a security officer. That wasn't even on your radar.
No, in fact, I've been asked a couple times to present to students, and one of the things I often like to say is that interestingly enough, if you think back, Yeah, because I sometimes get asked, what should we expect from AI? What direction is that going to go? And I often respond by saying, well, full transparency, we believe we know, we have an idea how we're going to be utilizing AI, but we don't fully know. We don't entirely understand because sometimes the technology is developed and you don't know what the consequences of that technology, where they may lead. An example I give is when I was a student, something called the internet, sort of became known and popular. Well, lo and behold, no one knew that 20 years later, the role of a security officer would exist due to the internet, right? So that was sort of a consequential result of this new technology. And so, in the same token, that we'll have to see what happens with AI. But yes, to your question, it wasn't on my radar. I had an interest in technology. I understood technology, and then life sort of led me down that path.
Yeah, that's neat. I do feel like there's sliding door moments, and we either have a choice to walk through them or we don't. But when we do walk them, sometimes it takes us to that next level. So, how did you get into healthcare?
So healthcare, the step into healthcare was just an opportunity that came along a couple years ago. And for me, healthcare, from an IT security standpoint, was a really interesting challenge because, in my opinion, when you know IT security, then I would say that healthcare probably sets the bar in terms of the challenge because you're not only dealing with a highly regulated environment, you're also dealing with impact that directly can have consequences for people's lives. If you are ransomed and your systems are down, people's lives are at stake. So it really sets the bar. And if you want to learn, I would say that that's probably a good learning path. So for that reason, I wanted to take on the challenge. I wanted a little bit more hands-on experience because my previous role as deputy CISO in our home building. It's a very large organization, right? Fortune 100 at this point, and so it was a very executive role, which is great. But I also felt that I wanted to get a little bit more hands-on experience in the environment at Mount Sinai. Permitted that, and so I got that. I got the experience that I wanted.
That's really neat. That's so one of the questions I like to ask leaders that are so accomplished is more about the mentorship that you've had along the way. And then did that pay that path forward? I know you mentioned to somebody kind of opening that door for you to can pursue security, but in general, has a mentor played an impact in your role in who you are today?
I can't emphasize that enough. In fact, anyone listening here, I mean, one of the biggest recommendations I can give is find a mentor and not just one, find multiple mentors. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the person you're reporting to, right? Find someone that you respect and that has the time and wants to hold your hand and be your partner in your professional journey. For me, yeah, there were multiple people that mentored me throughout my path and I remain intensely grateful to all of them to this day. They still function as mentors. One is my best friend who's an executive at IBM. Sometimes you need people that basically are willing to give you a shot. And so there was a lady named Valerie Arts at Lennar. She gave me a chance to come in and work at Lennar. And then later there was the CISO Juan Gomez Sanchez, who's currently a CISO at McLean in Dallas. He recognized the talent and brought me into his security group. And then later, I had another mentor, Max Boder, who's the CISO over at the Mosaic Company in Tampa. I would say these four people played very instrumental roles in allowing me the opportunity to deliver and prove myself. But also along the way, have truly provided great insights and thought leadership, and have allowed me to use them as a sounding board in decisions as I move forward in my life.
I love that. Did you pursue them or did they reach out to you?
I would say, well, my best friend at IBM, that's a friendship, and that developed into a friendship slash mentorship when we talk about our professional paths. The others, I'm trying to recall. I believe I approached them and said, "Look, I would appreciate mentorship. I'm looking to further my career, and I'd love your insights and your advice, and given your tenure and your experience." And they were more than willing. I've never encountered anyone that if you approach them and ask them for mentorship, that's turn me down. I'm not saying it doesn't happen out there, but Even in our with our iSoccer board, when we give our trainings for some of the certifications that we allow, this often comes up. And even just in a recent session about 2 weeks ago, we brought up the importance of a mentor. And in that call, we had two or three people that asked for mentors from the trainer and some of the other professionals in that call, and it was very fluid, and it was a very conducive environment to allow that to happen. And it happened. So mentorships came out of that call just because it came up for discussion. So again, I can't emphasize enough how important it is having a quarterback really for yourself.
Yeah, love that. I- I'm encouraged to even go find some more mentors myself from that. So now looking at your leadership style as a leader, do you have some things that you always do as a leader? Or like what's your style in leading people well?
So that's a great question. I mean, I think that my leadership style is probably rooted in life experiences. And I say life experiences. We've all endured hardships. We've all endured challenges in our lives. And from my perspective, that made me very empathetic and compassionate with the folks that I work with. And so, ultimately, yes, our goal is to deliver for the organization, but you're dealing with people, and people have challenges, and people have things happening in the background, and you never know what weight someone is carrying. And so in my leadership style, I take a very collaborative and democratic approach to leadership. I lean very heavily on SMEs. Some of my team members, I've had the privilege of working with some phenomenally talented and knowledgeable IT and IT security individuals that love to go down the rabbit hole of technology, and I'll go down that rabbit hole with them to a certain extent. But then I kind of pull back because, again, my focus remains a business focus to get things done. But I do lean on their expertise, and therefore their input is very important in making decisions moving forward. For example, if we're interviewing folks, I want to make sure that the team very very much supports the individual that we're looking at, because they're the ones that will be doing most of the work with that person. It shouldn't be. I don't see that as something that necessarily has to come top down. So yeah, I try to make sure that people are happy in their jobs. I mean, if you're not enjoying your work, then I think we might be just wasting our time.
Yeah, or go pursue something that does get you exciting,
Right, right,
like
exactly.
excited about what you're doing.
Yeah. So, and I've had, it's been very heartwarming to see some of the responses I've gotten from some of my team members, and to see how it motivates them to be able to lead with this style.
I love it. So switching to more the AI and security hat in you and your professionalism and your expertise. AI has been around for so long, but yet it's all the buzz, especially in healthcare right now. They're adopting it faster than a lot of other companies and organizations. What is your thoughts? Good, bad, right, wrong? What's your opinion around AI, specifically in healthcare or in general, and the risks that it runs, but also the benefits that it gives?
I think my answer is yes. No, I mean, like anyone else, I am just fascinated by what AI can deliver. And in fact, the last few days, I've been doing some very, in-depth app development, platform development, and I'm not a developer, and it's just been mind blowing how much I can actually create. And so I'm fascinated by the technology. But as a security professional, I'm also very well aware of the risks that come along with it, and also am very uncertain about what that also means for the future. Yes, there's no stopping it. There's no going back. Cat's out of the bag, and we're going to be utilizing this technology. It's going to be in our lives, whether we like it or not. But at the same time, I continue to have concerns around guardrails, and I don't think that those guardrails would be the guardrails that I think that we really need. I don't think that they're going to be implemented for a considerable time. I mean, the guardrails I'm talking about really need to be in place from an international treaty perspective, which takes me back to my economic development and diplomatic background. International treaties to basically understand, okay, what are the risks? What are the high level risk, in the same way that we almost approach nuclear weapons, right? What are these risks? How are we going to agree and verify that we're going to move forward on these? And then on an operational level for us in organizations, understanding how we're going to manage and curtail the risks as they relate to the integrity of the data, protection of loss of data, and availability of systems. So it's a complex question, and the answer is yes.
I love that. There's a lot to unpack, specifically when it comes to healthcare organizations, and that's primarily our audience in my space that I've been in for over 20 years. What is your advice to healthcare organizations that are implementing AI? What are the steps they need to do to protect themselves?
So from a healthcare perspective and protection perspective, I think this question comes up quite a bit in a lot of the meetings and conferences I go to, and I try not to oversimplify it, but if you peel the onion back on AI, it's not radically different. It's really just a software layer on top of things that we're already doing, which allows for scalability and speed. But at the same token, I mean, the risks still remain the same for the most part, right? If you had to break down the risk from AI, I would say it probably falls into three buckets. Number one is like, okay, how do we protect the data from leaving the organization, which in the olden days we used to call DLP, right? And then also understanding, okay, what are all the risks from any third parties that we're utilizing, or any of our vendors that decide to start utilizing AI from a third party risk management perspective, TPRM, which is something we're also already doing, but now we just need to add the AI domain to that risk equation. And then probably the other part, which is probably front of mind for a lot of people right now on AI, especially in healthcare, is like, okay, what about the integrity of the data that's coming back? So if we're using AI like ambient listing, for example, for listening to patients and diagnosing symptoms and basically deciding, okay, what is the right treatment, how are we verifying that that information that's coming back, that's correct? I mean, obviously we have the human in the loop right now, but I think being able to fully trust what an AI is coming back with is important. I use a funny example that, I recently had my first argument with ChatGPT, and when I say argument, it was an argument because it was very insistent that it was right, and I was very insistent it was wrong, and I actually had to pull up some articles and point out that it was wrong, and then it was very apologetic. So
I know. So funny.
so, of course, it's telling me, Ryan, you're thinking about that exactly the right way, right? That's the phrase that everyone that's used an LM model probably recognizes. But that's a key consideration. Are we getting the data back that we want to? And if I can just add to that, I think right now, I think what's really propelling the use of AI right now is, first of all, interest in process effectivity, efficiency, and also sometimes maybe from in a hospital setting, it may start coming more and more from patients that know that the AI can help with better diagnosis, because we're seeing that in some of the research and the data already, right? That AI can sometimes diagnose things better than humans can, in the same way that self-driving vehicles can sometimes have a better track record than humans. But at the same token, I think what's really going to propel AI in the not too distant future is when the insurance industry steps in and starts saying, but if you're using AI, then your premium is here. If you're not using AI, your premium is here, because we're following the data, and the data shows us that the AI is very accurate. So I think we're going to go from like a human in the loop to maybe in I don't know when, sometime in the future, maybe the human in the loop being the liability. But that's future speak.
It's interesting. Definitely huge business impacts, regardless of what angle you look at. I love that insurance claim. I've never heard that or thought of it, but I don't disagree with you. I think you're right on track because humans just make errors.
Yeah, and again, ultimately, in any business scenario, right? It all comes down to following the money, right? And so if the insurance premiums start going up, if you're not using AI, then or corporations are obviously going to use AI, because that's the easier choice. It'll reduce risk, it'll reduce premiums. So yeah, that's my perspective, and we'll see if this materializes. But it's an angle that not a lot of people are talking about just yet.
Like it. Something that we just started working on is I teamed with some AI SMEs and experts similar to people like you, and we are rolling out AI literacy programs for hospitals, making sure that all the employees are certified and trained on what they need to know for their role or specific to AI. To your point, they hallucinate or make mistakes, or have what do they need to know from a governance and risk perspective. Even someone at that front desk, you can't just pull up ChatGPT on a hospital desktop. And you know that from a cybersecurity perspective. But then the AI and the tools that are just coming so fast, and everybody thinks like, "Oh, I'm just going to use them."
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, obviously, from a again from a business perspective, the whole idea is that you want to enable your employees, and even from a security perspective, really that should be the goal. You want to enable them, but at the same time, you want to enable them safely in a secure
Right.
manner, and not just be the no guy. And so that's where the friction is, right? Because you want to make sure that you're allowing the organization to move forward in rapid pace, but how do you do that with with the right guardrails and deploy that in a way that that doesn't inhibit people's ability to do their work? Because guess what? If they don't have ChatGPT on their computer, they got it on their phone, right? So there's ways around it, but so what you really there's a host of questions that come up with that. There's the governance perspective, there's the training, the education. I often say that when it comes to security, I'd say 75% of your job in security consists of two things: communication and education. If you can do that right, then you can really help create that security first culture.
You want to come work for me? That's like our motto. Communicate, educate. It's so true. I love that. I'm actually going to just put that on our website.
Yeah, but a lot of times that can be a challenge for security folks because, traditionally speaking, the security folks were the technology gurus. I mean, they were very deep into the tech stack and were
Right.
not necessarily always the best communicator. And so that can be a challenge, especially when such an important part of the role is to communicate and educate. I mean, when I would do third party reviews with vendors and we would have findings of these vendors, go into the call, and the first thing is say, look, guys, this is not a gotcha moment. This is a moment to kind of talk about some of the gaps that we're finding. And this is collaborative because guess what? If we help you identify some of the gaps in your system, this will help you get business elsewhere. Right. And so, and we would work with them and point out, okay, this is why this is a concern. And so rather than becoming pain in the rear end, it was received as something of value and so you kind of reverse the situation rather than pushing security to the business, then people actually want to come to you for advice and recommendations on how to move forward. And so it's a change in mindset and it becomes a true
Yeah.
value add to the organization.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like attorneys are that way. I just had an interview with somebody that was an attorney for a hospital. And again, instead of it being she said the office of no, it was the office of collaboration. And it's exactly what you just said. It's how can we work together and empower you and move the organization forward? It's really good.
It is, but I think one of the things that's not as widely recognized in the industry is that the role of the CISO is unbelievably diverse. I mean, it is very broad because you not only need to know IT and the technical components, you need to be able to work with, with leadership, communicate the leadership terms to the board, to the audit committee. You work with HR, you work with legal, you work with procurement, you work with PR and marketing. You need to know the tech stack, not only know the tech stack, but often know the tech stack better than the IT people because you actually need to know how to protect it. The only way how to protect it is be able to pull it apart and find the flaws. Then on top of that, we're overlaying it with AI. It is an incredibly broad and incredibly deep role. And so I have my ideas on what the future of that role is going to look like, but I do think it's going to be subject to change.
So the future of your life is definitely secure because of who you are and what you've accomplished. So when you look at the future of business, technology, your leadership, what's your future hold? What gets you excited or what feels uncertain? Give me Ryan in 5 years from now.
So in the immediate future, the World Cup, because that's next month.
Nice. My
That gets me
husband's a
most
soccer
excited. Yeah,
fan.
I'm a Dutch guy, so it's in my veins, right?
Yes.
So that first and foremost, but for the future, I am just I'm watching in bewilderment in terms of like what the future will bring, and I'm excited and I have reservations, and when I talk to people in the industry, I often say, look, it's important that we obviously maintain our focus on what we're doing in IT and IT security and understand all this, but if it comes to fruition, what people keep talking about, the AI job apocalypse, I think we also kind of need to keep that in mind as well, right? Because I think it's not an unlikely risk at this point. And so one of the strongest recommendations I could probably give, and I know I'm getting, if you want me to go down this path because you haven't really, yeah, this is kind of subsiding from your question, but I think people also really need to start thinking about like what motivates them as people, what makes them whole as people. Because having had my professional life here in the U.S. For the most part, a lot of folks they identify purely through their job identity and their financial income, and my father was one of those folks. And I think that if we're looking to a future where jobs may not be as certain as they've always been, you know, I think it's important to truly understand, okay, who are you as a person, right? And what motivates you as a person aside from just the job identity. I know I'm doing that, right? Because I don't know if my job is future certain for the future. It sounds great, but there's no guarantees, right? Because as fast as things
Mhm.
are developing.
It sounds like that would be some advice that you would give to even the younger generation or even leaders in your seat or thinking, oh, if I've arrived because I'm at the top and I have all these accolades and I have all these certifications and I sit on all these boards, at the end of the day, what I'm hearing you say is what makes you whole. And that's your challenge, not only for yourself, but for other people listening.
Yeah, and this is again, this is just my perspective, but I do believe that your professional identity is just one part of who you are. We all have our ideas on how we want to be remembered, and the job is part of it. But I want to be remembered for who I am as a person and what my interests were and what I was able to help do for other people. That's fulfilling to me, and doing for other people. Part of it is also the job, but I don't hang on to the title or the professional recognition. It's nice, but it's not my primary driver.
Is that about a lot of the interviews that I do? A lot of the most successful people are the most humble and they're not looking for the titles. They are literally just wanting to make an impact and leave a legacy for when, they're gone and or for the people that are following in their footsteps. Did they pay it forward? Going back to the mentor question and the leadership question, that is what matters. I agree. I love that you shared that.
Absolutely, because when we think of the mentors that you just mentioned, I don't think about okay, what did we do on a day to day basis, and what are the things that we did on an operational level. But I think of okay, how did we work together? How did these folks mentor me and educate me? And that's what's front and foremost for myself.
As we wrap up, last question. I call the podcast The Missing Piece. And it's really your interpretation of that. The question is, was there a missing piece moment in your life that moved the needle, which we talked about a little bit, those sliding door moments? Or is there a missing piece that you want to solve or be a part of in the future? Or when I just say the missing piece, does anything resonate with you?
So yeah, I mean that's actually it resonates a lot for numerous reasons because when I look at my trajectory, my professional trajectory, it's taken some twists and turns, and some of them were a lot of them were twists and turns outside of my control. So, for example, what propelled me to be successful that goes really to the core of who I am was determination, and determination for me was born out of hardship. A simple example: when my parents divorced, my mother was American. My mother went to the Netherlands. I was raised in a country where I didn't speak the language, didn't know anyone, and I was determined to go back to the US. So that determination was what propelled me forward to absolutely make sure that I got my degree, that I came back to the US, and I did that. And then the next probably biggest hardship I encountered was illness. I dealt with cancer about 15 years ago, and that was a very, very tough period. And after that, it was the economics of the 2009 2010 era were pretty bad, and I decided at that moment, look, I'm going to go into an industry that's solid and that I know that I've got a strong future regardless. And that brought me into IT and IT security, and that was pure determination. And so yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the missing piece is really okay. What motivates you, right? What do you have that motivation in place, and do you recognize it, and does it align with your overall life goals, and how do you execute on that to accomplish what you're looking to accomplish? And never stop learning, right? Never stop learning. It never ends. I mean, I find it fascinating to be able to reinvent yourself. Some of my old colleagues and coworkers from economic development, they look at me and say, "How did you go from economic development to becoming a CISO?" I said, "I don't know." That's the honest.
Yeah. Applying yourself.
Applying yourself and being dedicated and committed and knowing that you can do it.
I love that, knowing you could do it. think the confidence to believe in yourself and then have the discipline to execute on it, it's you could do anything.
Yeah, I think if you have a plan in your mind on how you're going to do it, in that case of security, it was to get into IT and then security and pursue the certifications and get involved in the community and have mentors. Those are 4 or 5 bullet points. That each of them, they were imperative to my path, to my professional path, and so that would be the recommendation I give to anyone else that may be considering a change of industry, change of jobs, going into security, whatever path you decide to go. You follow those rules from that framework from a high level is the same no matter what industry you go into.
You remind me of a professional growth mindset leader and somebody that honestly, you've overcome so much. I mean, beat cancer, you've traveled internationally, you have all these, accolades, but then at the same time, you're still super humble and clearly love to learn. So there's just a really great growth mindset you've developed.
Well, I would thank you for that. I mean, what I can tell you is probably the accomplishment I'm most proud of is the fact that I accomplished a mindset of ambition yet contentment. So I'm absolutely content with where I am, while at the same time I remain ambitious, and that those two things are not in conflict. But to accomplish that mindset, it's most people don't get there, and I think that is the perfect equilibrium for me to be ambitious while also being content and happy with where I'm at.
Love that. Well, thank you for being a guest. It's been great to get to know you and learn from you. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, and if any one of your listeners wants to reach out and find me on LinkedIn, that's where part of me
Is that
lives.
your best? Perfect. That's what I was going to ask, how best to contact you. LinkedIn's good?
Yeah, LinkedIn is fine.
Perfect. We'll make sure that they have your contact information. Well, thank you, Ryan. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much. This has been great. I very much enjoyed it.
Every leader has a story, and every story reveals another piece of the bigger picture. What if the missing piece wasn't something you had to find, but something you were meant to become? Subscribe, share, and keep leading with intention. I'm April Reed, and I'll see you in the next conversation on The Missing Piece.